Hi, and welcome to today's episode of Breaking Free from Churchianity. I once had an employee who struggled to tell people no. That's one of the worst things you can have, is when you have an employee who just says yes to everybody. If someone requested something from her, regardless of how busy she was, she would say yes. And over time, I noticed she was staying at work later and later. Eventually, she was feeling the stress of the deadlines and expectations of so many people because she couldn't tell people no. I mean, it's just, the projects just keep piling up. She keeps saying yes to things that really are not her responsibility, and eventually it starts to impact her ability to do her job. Over time, her work began to suffer, and I noticed she was beginning to be late for other meetings during the day. So I eventually sat down with her and talked to her about her project load, deadlines, scheduling, and things of that nature. In that meeting, I gave her permission to tell people no to their deadlines, no to their expectations, and pressure to deliver in a certain way. You could see the relief on her face, but she was concerned. What if they are unhappy with me or get upset if I tell them no? And I told her, I said, listen, tell them no, and if that isn't enough, have them talk to me, and I'll tell them no as well. In other words, I told her, listen, just tell them no, and if there's a problem, tell them to come see me. Why? Because I had learned to tell people no. I had learned to begin to set boundaries. It took me some time to do that, but that was something she had yet to learn. And so it took some time, but she eventually learned to tell people no, offer realistic expectations and deadlines and outcomes, and prioritize her scheduling. She was back in charge rather than other people she was trying to please. So this is a huge issue. She was losing control of her life. She was losing control of what she did at work. And by telling people no and prioritizing what she did and being honest about deadlines and what she could and couldn't do, regardless of a person's response, she began to get back in control of her life to some degree. I could tell you story after story of clients who have come into my office suffering from people pleasing, both within and outside their religious experience, the church, if you will, and the journey they took to be free of people pleasing and embracing their true selves, which is in Christ. I mean, it's amazing over the last 30 years how many people I've worked with that have struggled with this very thing. And I struggled with it, as I spoke of in the first episode of freedom from people pleasing. And so as I began to help others, I began to realize, wow, this is a huge deal. And person after person began to get their life back, began to recover. They began to become free. Last week, we examined the origins of people-pleasing and codependency, if you will. In today's program, we're going to examine how to begin recovery from people-pleasing. It's one thing to say, I don't want to be a people-pleaser. I hear that all the time. It's another thing to understand what is required of me to begin to come out of being a people-pleaser. And those things are different. A lot of people want to follow Christ, but many don't. A lot of people want to start a business, but they're unwilling to do what it takes to maintain a business and make it successful. Many people want to lose weight, but they're unwilling to do what's required to lose weight. You see, it's one thing to want something. It's a very different thing then to put in the effort and commit yourself to a certain path that will lead you to your goal. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Now, one of the difficult things is helping my clients understand that people-pleasing, codependency, is an addiction. It's an addiction. When I tell them that, many people are surprised because you don't hear people talking about it as an addiction, but it is. It's no different than being addicted to alcohol or being addicted to drugs or sex or gambling or any number of things which are endless. It's just a way in which we have coped with life. We have coped with how we feel about ourselves. And so it is addictive. It actually gives you a rush. It releases endorphins, and it's something that causes us to feel better when we do it. But the outcomes are not what we want. Melanie Beatty wrote Codependent No More back in the late 70s. Now, since then, she's updated it about 5 times, and she recently came out with the latest version back about a year ago. You can find it on Amazon. This is a classic on recovery from codependency. I think, this is just my opinion, there's a lot of material out there on it, but I think her book is a necessary read for anyone who wants to break the habit of people-pleasing, who wants to break the addictive cycle of people-pleasing. That book did a tremendous amount of good for me. And I think if this is something you're interested in, you should get it. In her book, she emphasized that people pleasing or codependency needs to be treated as an addiction, no different than any other addiction. And I think initially this was not always accepted, if you will, in the helping community. But I think today most people would agree that codependency is addiction. And it's something that has to be approached in that way. This means that coming out of codependency requires admitting you have a problem. One of the first things I do with my clients is to make sure they understand that this is a problem, that they have a problem. And it's a lot greater than just, well, I did this, I've been a people pleaser, but I could stop it if I really wanted to. Well, I've been this way in my marriage, but I don't have to do that if I don't want to. And the truth of the matter is that they are doing it because they have to. they don't have any control over the decisions they're making. They're doing it in this endless cycle and loop, and it's literally becoming it's addictive, and it is how they cope. And that's what addictions are there for, is to help people cope. And so you can't get better also apart from God's help. You're not going to get better apart from God's help. There has to be a spiritual dimension to your recovery. And ultimately, that's going to be the thing that makes the difference. There then has to be, I have found, the willingness to pursue recovery. So if you're willing to pursue recovery and do some of the things that are required, then most of the people I have worked with have been able to have a measure of recovery, a measure of healing, and many times completely come out of it. But you have to have that willingness to pursue it. And then the willingness to do the work of recovery. So the willingness to pursue it means I'm going to make changes. I'm going to begin focusing on other things. The willingness to do the work of recovery means that I'm going to go and do the things that I have to do to see myself begin to heal. Because coming out of people pleasing means that there has to be an inner healing. There has to be an inner work. And the work of recovery is about that. It's about going inward and seeing what's the inner problems. Because everything that's occurring outwardly is occurring because of what's occurring inwardly. And it is the inward pain of the soul, is what I call it. The inward trauma of the soul, the hurt of the soul, the disappointment of the soul trying to protect itself, that has created so many of these external problems. And it is in these external problems that we feel the pressure to do something about it. Well, when you decide you're going to do something about it, that means you're going to have to go inward to do it. And that's the work of recovery. Now, the second thing I want to say is that the journey of recovery requires support from other people. This is not a job you do on your own. This isn't going it alone type of thing. This requires being with people who understand what you're going through, who can support you and can challenge you, because we still have what's called that old stinking thinking. And having those individuals who are also in recovery, who are also taking the journey, and who also understand where you're coming from is going to be very, very helpful. CODA groups help people to recognize and change patterns of codependency. CODA stands for Codependence Anonymous, is a fellowship based on the principles of the 12-step programs. And I really like the 12-step programs. I think when a person is initially coming out of an addictive cycle, the 12 steps can really help because it sets up a structure and a process in which you can start to build relationships with people who are also healing. And many times those relationships are going to be the healthiest relationships you have for a while. And so getting into a program where you're with people who are doing the same thing you're doing helps you to find relationships that aren't codependent and to see what do they look like and what does it mean to say no and how do I set boundaries and things of that nature and how I deal with my emotions. And those groups can help with that. But the biggest problem for the codependent is they're controlling. They want to control everything because they want to keep the pain away. They don't want to be rejected. They don't want to be abandoned. They don't want to see other people that they're trying to take care of hurt. They want to fix whatever they think is wrong. And it's one of those things that it's very difficult to be a codependent and not be controlling. And so if you're working with other people who are trying to come out of codependency, they can call you on your stuff when you're in meetings and things like that. So I want to encourage you to find a CODA group. You can go online at CODA, Codependent Anonymous, and they have groups really all over the United States, and I encourage you to find one in your area. The greatest thing is they help you to recognize and change patterns of codependent behavior, such as prioritizing others' needs over your own, seeking validation through other people, or struggling with boundaries in relationships. Those are some tremendous areas that we have to look at, and these groups can help with that. In these groups, they share experiences. Members share their struggles and successes with codependency in a safe, non-judgmental environment. I think that's the greatest thing. So you go into a group like that and it's non-judgmental. No one's judging you. No one's down on you. No one's saying, well, see, she messed up again. That's not the way they are. It's the it's probably one of the few places during the week that you can go and be yourself. And we all need that. You can also find community support there. Members support each other through similar experiences and encourage progress towards self-reliance and healthy relationships. Rather than trying to find your validation through people, you begin to find it inwardly. You begin to love who you are, begin to see that you're worthy to be loved, to be respected, and to be accepted. Spiritual support from a respected friend or spiritual guide is also important. You really need someone who understands spiritually where you're coming from. We offer a program called Steps to Thriving. It's basically just allows you to begin to look at, who is God, who am I, who are others, and what that means is to see that you are loved unconditionally by God, which gives you freedom then to begin to love yourself. And in loving yourself, you begin to have the freedom to love other people. What does that mean? That means as you begin to forgive yourself, as you begin to heal from the wounds, the trauma, the hurts of the past, you begin to embrace who you actually are, your true self. And that makes it easier then to start setting boundaries. It makes it easier to say no and learn when to say no and how to say no, how to communicate what you really feel and what it is you really want to people, rather than sort of skirting issues and not really getting down to it. How to overcome those overwhelming feelings at times when you try to have a difficult conversation. We help people with that. All of this is essential to coming out of codependency, coming out of people pleasing. You really do need to have others in your, if you will, in your corner. That's how I think of it. You need people in your corner. You need a group in your corner, maybe a counselor or a spiritual guide, or maybe both, in your corner here. They're working with you. And if you're interested in our Steps to Thriving program, the website is there on the screen. Just go there and contact us through the contact page, and we'll be happy to get back with you. But whatever you do, don't do it alone. Never do it alone. Jesus had 12 disciples. He didn't live life alone. He had people around him all the time. Well, I think the same's true for us. We're never intended to be alone. We're intended to do life together. And so I encourage you, don't do this alone. Find people who can support you. The next thing I want to look at is the necessity of setting boundaries for healthy living. One of the things people struggling with codependency, people pleasing can do is to set healthy boundaries. For instance, if the person struggles with saying no to people, one of the boundaries you could have is just to say maybe, and that you'll get back with them after you've considered it. And that could be a boundary. You don't have to say yes immediately. And saying maybe, a lot of people don't like that. Well, when are you going to get back? Well, just give me a time, and I'll get back with you, and I'll let you know. And then that way you can go back to your schedule. Some things you're going to say yes to, but some things you need to say no to. Maybe you need to sit down with your spouse and say, hey, they asked me to do this. What do you think? Your spouse will most of the time will be honest with you. Don't do that. Or, okay, it's fine, but remember this, or maybe you have a friend say, so-and-so asked me to do this. What do you think? And the friend, usually they'll be honest about it. Or your kids will be honest, and usually you'll come out of that. You'll know. A lot of times intuitively you'll have a feeling, I don't have time for that. I don't need to do that. And then you can send them an email, or you can call them and say, listen, I can't do this. And maybe sending them an email is better than calling, because that way you can't get caught up in a conversation where they try to sell you on it, at least initially for the person who's coming out of codependency. Another thing maybe is if you're afraid to have difficult conversations with people for fear of their reaction or what they might say or do, a step may be to sit down and write out what you want to say, then practice saying it. So in other words, you're going to have a hard conversation. You don't anticipate this is going to go really well. The person's going to get upset. Sit down and write out, what would I say? How would I say this? What's the best way to say this? Most appropriate way to say it? Write it down and be as objective about it as you can. Maybe let somebody else read it that you trust, who's a third party and totally outside the relationship. This allows you to overcome the nervousness of what you will say and how to say it. A lot of times it's that nervousness, it's that feeling of fear. What will they do? What will they say? If you already know what you're going to say, it goes a long ways to being able to say it. And then practice it. Practice it long before you ever go into the conversation. Most of my clients have done this. This is part of the Steps to Thriving program that we do. And they will sit down and write this out and practice it before they ever go and speak to the individual about the no that they're going to give or the boundary they're setting. And sometimes they'll come to the appointment with me and they'll read this to me and they'll say, what do you think? And I'll give them my honest feedback based on my years personally of recovery and helping others to recover. And so it's one of those things that if you do it, you'll find that it creates greater confidence. The reaction of the person that you're talking to is out of your control. That's something to remember. But the more confident you are going into the conversation, especially about what you're going to say, the more likely you will have the results you want. Because most people want to be able to say no without damaging the relationship. They want to say no without losing the relationship, but they still need to say no. And so being able to practice doing this, doing it effectively, successfully, while still having the relationship in some degree, that's a win. And that's where we want to go. Another thing is writing out your boundaries for difficult relationships or possibly for situations at church where you find yourself saying yes all the time when you should say no. And so this was helpful. So just write out, here's the boundaries for church. I'm going to do this and this, and I'm not doing anything else. Or I'm available to do this much work during the week, 2 hours a week, and that's it. Or I'm passionate about married adult ministry, but I'm not passionate about youth ministry. Or I'm passionate about youth ministry, but I'm not passionate about adult ministry. And so I'm not doing anything with adult ministry. I want to be in youth ministry. That's where my passion is. And so find out, who am I? What am I passionate about? And then focused on doing that. And say, you know what, thank you for the opportunity to do that, but I'm not helping with the adult party. I'm not helping with the adult class. I'm not helping with what's going on over there. I'm going to stick on the youth ministry because that's what I'm passionate about. The more you can set boundaries and do it effectively and maintain them, the greater your confidence is going to grow to be able to do it with more and more people. Because typically the codependent is having to do this not just at home or at work or at church, but in all their relationships, with mom and dad, with your sister, with your brother, with your neighbor, with the HOA, whatever it may be. You've been saying yes to so many people that you're going to have to sort of begin to do this with each relationship. Again, you might want to start with one relationship and sort of work up to the others. But if you can begin to set boundaries in the early days, it can really help in the progress that you make. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is the necessity of clear, effective communication. It's essential to communicate your boundaries and the decisions you've made in regards to no and yes. In other words, when you made a decision, I'm not doing that, it is really essential to communicate. I have an exercise I teach my clients to help them communicate boundaries. And it seems to help a lot because many times if you know how to communicate your boundaries, you're really almost 90% of the way there. It's the ability to communicate it in an effective, confident way. Even though, knowing you can't control the response of the individual, if you're prepared and you know what you want to say and you say it clearly and effectively, it goes a long ways to getting the results you'd like. The first thing is to be able to confront. Now, when I say confront, I'm not talking about something ugly or mean. You don't need to be ugly or mean with people. To confront means to be brave enough to say something about hard things. That's what confront is. I'm going to confront and say something about a hard thing. When someone violates a boundary, you must confront it immediately. You cannot wait 2 or 3 days and then say something to them. Once it has been violated and they knew about it, you had told them this is a boundary. You've made the boundary clear. Now you need to learn how to confront. And one of the things that can occur is that we get afraid to confront. We're afraid to, I can't say that. Maybe a lot of times I'll tell my own experiences with my clients and they're like, you said that? Oh, I could never say that. Well, you're going to have to if you want to get better. There's going to have to be hard conversations, and that means we have to confront certain things. And so ask for a timeout and get their attention. I have found many times if I kind of do this, people are kind of, what? And just want to take a timeout. And that allows them to know, hey, I want to say something important here. Or I'd like to say something to you. Timeout. I'd like to say something to you. Stop whatever's going on and get into the moment. That's just really what you're doing, is you're getting yourself and them into the moment because you really need their attention. And by doing kind of the timeout and saying, timeout, wait a second, I have something I need to say, you've got their attention. The second thing is to make sure that you communicate clearly. Once you've done the timeout, once you've got their attention, make sure you explain the boundary again to them. Hey, listen, remember what I told you about that activity? I'm not going to be doing that with you. We had talked about that several weeks ago. Do you remember that conversation? Well, I didn't think that's what you said. Well, let me make this clear. I'm not going to be doing that. And I have a lot of reasons for that. One is my time. The other is I just have too many other commitments right now. But I just want you to make clear I'm not going to be doing that. You then need to help them understand why it's important and that they not violate this boundary. So you've told them, hey, listen, I can't do this. This is why. And then this is why the boundary is important. But I want to make sure you understand, don't include me on this activity again, okay? I've made it very clear to you about why I'm not going to do that. And I've told you the reason. So please be respectful of that. And then you need to seek agreement. That's the next thing, is seek agreement. And the way we seek agreement is by asking, are we in agreement? Or do you understand? Agreed? And something of that nature. If they are not, or if they say, well, I thought you had committed to that, then communicate the boundary again to them and say, no, I know there was a misunderstanding, but I'm not committed to that and I will not be in the future. Okay? And again, make sure they understand, even if they disagree, make sure they understand that this is a boundary. I won't be doing this. I know you misunderstood that, but I'm trying to make that clear. Are we in agreement with that? Are we clear? And then that's when you need to give them opportunity to respond. You always want to go back to seeking agreement. And the reason you want to seek agreement is that we want to make sure that we're understanding what my position is on this and where I'm at and what I am and am not going to do. They may get mad, walk from the table, or leave the room. It doesn't matter what they do. Okay, what matters is that you've been able to do what you can do. The last thing then is to communicate consequences. For instance, if someone is blowing up your phone with text messages over something that you've told them once about, the consequences could be losing the privilege of texting you for a month. In other words, if you told them, hey, I'm not going to do this activity, and then they leave and later they're blowing your phone up saying, well, I thought you were going to da-da-da-da, and they are kind of, blowing your phone up, which is what, they kind of do, because that's how they respond when you tell them no. And in the past you would say, well, okay, I don't want you to have to go through, I'll do it. What you need to do is say, listen, if you continue to send text to me like this, I'm going to take away your privilege to text me for at least a month. You need to understand that. So please do not text me again about this. And then if they do, because most people don't believe you, you just, keep them from being able to text you, block them, and send them an email and say, listen, I've blocked you on my text, and I'll unblock you in a month, and then we can talk about this if you want, but you're not going to be able to text me. And so they may call you, I can't believe you did that. Well, listen, I've made my decision. And if you call me again about this, then I'm going to block you on my phone. I'm not going to talk to you about this, okay? And then they may find you at church, and you may say, listen, I love you, but you're really harming our relationship right now. I don't want you to do this. And so ultimately, some people are going to get it, and some are not. Some are not going to be happy about it. But if you are consistent, and that's the biggest thing we're looking for through communication, is we want to be consistent about what we communicate and what we do, because people respond to consistency. All right? They don't respond to necessarily always what you say, but they will respond to what you do. And if you constantly give them the same message over and over and over and over, they'll get it. They will see, oh, okay, there's been a change here. They may not like it. They may be upset with you, but they'll begin to see something's changed. She's not doing what she normally does. She means this. And hopefully they'll begin to respect the boundaries that you have set. Now, this is the thing. The healthier you get, the more uncomfortable some relationships will become. Okay. In other words, it gets worse before it gets better sometimes. Not everyone's going to be excited about your recovery from codependency. You have to realize that most of the relationships in your life were built on this thing of codependency, of people pleasing. That's a lot of times why people like hanging out with you, because you'll do what they want you to do. You'll do it when they want you to do it. You'll say yes to everything. And that gives them a measure of safety. That gives them a measure of happiness, because they get their way, and they're happy when they get their way. But all of a sudden, you're not doing that anymore. You're actually showing your self-worth and value. You're actually respecting yourself. And they're not used to that. As you get healthy, that means an uncomfortable change for other people. It just does. The more healthy you get, the more uncomfortable it becomes for current relationships. People may be used to always having their way and you saying yes to whatever they need you to do. The guy down the street, you'll come over and fix whatever with him whenever he needs it. The girl who always wants you to talk about what she wants to talk about and do what she wants to do. The friend who always comes in and wants to take over. The family member who wants to always tell you what to do and wants you to do it with her. That's part of coming out of people pleasing, is that as you change, some people are going to be uncomfortable. Some people may even distance themselves from you in time because they misunderstand the changes that are going on inside you that are impacting your world and their world. Misunderstanding is a big part of recovery. Some people just don't understand the changes. They don't understand what's happened to you. You're not the person they used to be. You're not as fun as you used to be. Well, of course, you were doing everything they wanted you to do. Well, now you're not. You were involved in 15 different programs at church. You're only involved in one now. And maybe for a time you're not involved in anything, which is what I would advise. Just getting out of everything, just having some rest and peace, and let this process occur of healing. Some people may even cut you off to punish you for not being there for them. I've seen that. I've had people do that to me. They cut off the relationship because you don't do everything they want you to do. Don't be alarmed, okay? This happens and it is necessary for change. You will lose some relationships. Some people simply can't take this journey with you. That's unfortunate. But it's part of the price of healing and getting better and getting your life back, okay? And being the person you actually are and beginning to love that person. That's just part of it. Those people simply are no longer comfortable with the changes that are occurring in your life. And so they're going to choose to go in a different direction. And that's okay. Let them do that. You continue the journey of recovery, because God will bring people into your life who are healthier and won't demand those things from you. We must also accept that some of our family may choose to become distant. This can be some of the most difficult of all the consequences. When you begin to come out of codependency, some family members, they don't understand this, and they don't see it as a positive change. They see it as a negative change. And they'll begin to distance themselves. They won't call as often. You may not get invited to everything because you're not there to do what they want you to do. You're not there to be involved in what they want you to be involved in. This is one of the inner fears of the people pleaser. What will happen to my family? What will happen to my relationship with my mom, my dad especially? What about my sister? They're my family. This is the closest people on earth. What about my husband? What if all of a sudden he didn't love me anymore? Well, people are going to be who and what they are. You can't control it. All you can do is heal and get better and trust God with the changes and the consequences with those changes. But let me tell you something. It is worth it. It is worth it. And God will deal with those relationships, okay, and with those people. You continue to trust him. You continue to do the inner work of healing, loving yourself so that you can have appropriate relationships where you can set boundaries and tell people no and begin then to be yourself. Always remember you're right on track. You're right where you need to be. Keep going. And the genuine inner you will begin to emerge. And that is a beautiful person. That person is worthy of love, respect, of being told, okay, that's what you want, that's fine. Of people realizing that you have boundaries as well, that you have desires as well, that you also are a unique individual who deserves to be heard, that you're not invisible, you're there, and you're an equal. Wouldn't that be great to live that way? That's where we're going. As I said earlier, trust God with your recovery journey. Above all, learn to trust God for your recovery journey. It is a journey. This is not a marathon. I hear from clients all the time. They want to know, why is this taking so long? Why aren't I better already? And, they spent 40 years being codependent and they want to get out of it in like 30 days. But you spent an entire life doing things a certain way, learning things a certain way, going through trauma, going through difficulties, going through hurts, and that's got to heal, man. It takes time to do that. All of the things that have occurred have to, inwardly have to be dealt with. And then there has to be outward actions then that go with that inner healing. And those things take time to learn. It's the skill set you have to learn. And so, be patient, trust God. He knows what he's doing. You're right on track, right on time, and everything will come together as it needs to. Next week, we will look at beyond people pleasing, how to maintain healthy relationships with ourselves and with others.